And I know that it's going to be one of those moments that are sealed in time for people's testimonies, especially those who are activators for the kingdom. And I believe you're listening to this podcast for that exact reason, because you're a founder, got it, innovator, and trailblazer. That's what F.I.T stands for. It's so crazy to see the development of what founder has become out of the birthing place of not Fit and Faith, but even before that, the session, which Anthony Hart shared all about on stage at the opening kind of keynote and share with him and Jeannie. There's so much. We could just get into a conversation just about that. But I have a list that I had to create because I knew if I jumped on here and I pressed play, I would go all sorts of ways. And I know that I could probably make 10 million podcasts just from that event if I took every single tiny moment and extrapolated on the millions of miracles that God performed during this weekend. But I want to create a synopsis. So here's what I got. The first is the preparation. You know, one of the biggest moments of reflection for me was afterwards, when so many people were sending just nuggets of love, but they were not highlighting or featuring me. And I shared all about this on the Girls Gone Holy podcast as our reflection podcast that I'll clip in here so that you guys can hear it. And I won't repeat myself in that regard because I want you to go listen to that show as well. But it was about this context of obedience and receiving these words of affirmation in a whole new way than I ever have. And I know it was premised on what I had previously received last year's conference from dear friends who were the bass player, Jesse Wood, and his bride, Davina Hughes, who were both at this conference again and are a part of the founding family. And they told me that I can't keep pushing off the affirmation that people are giving, specifically not as in a way of false humility. That's not really what they were saying, but it can be perceived as such if we are not really understanding what God has deposited in us, right? We are his glory. We are his light. We are the vessel for him to be glorified and to be known. And it is our action. It is the preparation. It is the processing. It is the yes. It's the steps of obedience that allow other people to bear witness to what God can do when you let God be God. And I'll be honest, preparing for this conference, setting up for this conference, was unlike any in the past. In the past, we've had multitudes of team members, and this time it really felt like two. We'll say three because Gary always gives his lens and is such a support and helped financially maneuver through. But honestly, without Candace this year, I don't know what would have happened. It wouldn't have been as dynamic as it was. I can assure you that. But God showed off, and he showed up, and he said to me in specific moments when I was on stage witnessing everyone worship, "This is holy ground." Gosh, it's the glorious song from Jay Stallings. You guys got to download his song. He actually recorded that last year after the conference. Holy ground. It's called Glory. I call it Holy Ground all the time, by Joseph Stallings. Look that up. I'll put it in the show notes for you. But it was that moment of saying, this is holy ground, and look what I will do. You're building my church on the rock. And there's been so much revelation that has occurred from season to season, conference to conference. But this one of all was like fully God's vision. And there wasn't tainting, there wasn't shifting, there wasn't people pleasing. And of course, we're in the flesh. It was by no means perfect. I already have so many constructive criticism takeaways that I, as a team and I individually, want to counter, and I want to allow God to do what God wanted to do. There were some moments even on stage, like in my final share of the poem, where the Holy Spirit was like, stop. And I'm like, wait, but this was a plan. And I went into my own Control Alt Delete moment. And I'm like, I'm going to finish this out. But afterwards, I realized, like, man, I was off base on that. Like, it just should have been baptisms, and it should have been a goodbye. And yeah, so there's things that I too am learning. But ultimately, I want you guys to be able to receive in the understanding that the process that it took, the pain that it took, the disappointment of yearly experiences that happened that it took, were me pushing past my own limiting beliefs of the impossibilities so that God could show off that he is a possible God. And so I know there are people who are out there who are like, I just want to write a book, and I just want to be a part of this anthology that she's talking about, or I just want to do this one step of obedience that God has given me, to get out of the boat, to quit your corporate job, to say yes to a marriage. You know, we had 2 engagements transpire at the last one, and they're now married. And I just think about our yeses and how powerful they are for eternal foundation. And so often we're making yeses out of our own desire for control, or our own desire for happiness or safety or understanding. And when we release that to the Lord and we are actually operating in that state of humility and in that state of full surrender, man, like I said, it's not easy, but it is so worth it. And so I want to just honor each of you guys for being in the room. I shared this from stage, but Chris Rickstrew, a brother from the Founder Fam, he asked me when it was before the conference started, the day before, no one was in the space, but the tables were all set and the screens were projected. And he said, "What are you feeling? Like, one word, what would you say right now?" And I had to close my eyes. I almost started weeping, and I just gave myself space to feel. And I'm like, what do I feel? Because you can get in the midst. I had production on my mind. I had all these people coming in town and flying from all over the country and other countries. Shout out Bahamas for being in this space. And I want to be present with everyone. And yet I know that I can't, and that his presence matters most. And so I took that breath, and that word that came to me was honor. And I went through a 7-day water fast earlier this year. First time I ever did something so extreme. My friend James Zing, who is also in the marketplace ministry world, invited me into this fast. I did a 3-day one, and then we did this full 7-day one. And I had so much energy at the end, guys. It was nuts. So if you ever want to ask me questions about fasting, I should do a whole podcast about my show notes and things from that, because it was wild. But what God taught me was the story of Saul and David. And I was just following the yearly Bible at that point. So it wasn't pre-construed or like, God, what should I do? It was just like, here's the date, here's the thing. It just happened to fall within this time frame. And I was circling some really big prayers. I love Mark Batterson's whole series. I just actually screenshot and shared to a girlfriend who's dealing with some things with her kiddos, a screenshot of the praying circles over your children. But he has the praying circles experience, the whole book and series. And I thought about him in that moment of, gosh, I am praying circles around so many things. I have no idea how God is going to show up. Similar to this conference, I have so many things to think about, so many roles and responsibilities, and I have no idea how God's going to show up, but I'm certain that he will. And that's where we have to keep our faith. That mustard seed of faith is just like, he's done it before and he's going to do it again.